Hello, good day everyone. So welcome to our lecture number 2 for Understanding the Self or GNED 08. Our introduction last week was our lecture number 1. So for lecture number 2, we're going to talk about the different perspective of philosophy when it comes to understanding the self or understanding ourselves better. So what is philosophy? So philosophy is the study of how we understand our existence and how we come to know what is real, good, and true. It aims to discuss questions such as what is real, what is truth, and even what is beautiful. So seeking out knowledge is the main goal of philosophy. Seeking out knowledge, seeking out information. The first philosopher that we're going to talk about is Socrates, which introduced to us the Socratic method, which is the search for the correct definition of things. He will not lecture anything, but will rather ask questions to engage the person in discussion. The way of learning and gathering information during the time of Socrates was in the process of question and answer, or the Socratic method. Socrates was considered as a great teacher during his time because of this particular method, and the question and answer method is somewhat similar to how an investigation is being done, just like with the police. So the police will ask the suspects what were they doing, uh, where were they during the time of the event. And then it can also be similar to our traditional classroom discussion, wherein the teacher will ask questions regarding the topic, and from the answers of the students, the teacher will now form argumentative dialogues based on the information shared by the students. Now, the goal is to bring the person to closer understanding of what is real, what is truth, and what is beautiful. One quotation coming from Socrates was that the unexamined life is not the good life. The unexamined life is not the good life. So for Socrates, worth is what people use to define why they still live. Your worth or your value, ano ba yung halaga mo? If their life has worth, they will continue to live and enjoy life. In this way, an unexamined life is not worth living, because without examining life, you cannot determine its worth to you, and therefore have no reason to want to live. True self is not the body, but the soul. Also, according to Socrates, true self is not the body, but the soul. So our body acts just like a packaging which contains the soul, which is eventually our true self or true identity. Socrates, being the wisest of all men, believed that there are others who are wiser than him. So that is Socrates being humble, but also at the same time knowing factually that he was not the wisest during his time, and that other individuals probably know more than him. So he is the only one who knew that he did not know everything. Real understanding comes from within the person, and his method forces people to use their innate reason by reaching inside themselves to their deepest nature. So for Socrates, the goal of his method, the Socratic method, is to make people think, seek, and ask again and again. It is important for us to realize that they do not know everything, that there are things that they are ignorant of, and to accept this and continue learning by searching. Next philosopher, let's go to Plato. So Plato, well, Socrates left a strong influence to Plato. So Plato was one of the students of Socrates. And then Plato's metaphysics is the theory of form. Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. Okay. So one of the work of Plato is, we have here an image, we call this, or he called this, the allegory of the cave. So the allegory of the cave is uh, actually has a story behind it. So this particular piece of philosophy routinely comes up in discussions of how humans perceive reality and whether there is any higher truth or existence. So the allegory of the cave states that there exist prisoners chained together in a cave, and then behind the prisoners is a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners are people carrying puppets or other objects. This casts a shadow on the other side of the wall. The prisoners watch these shadows, believing them to be real. Plato suggests that one prisoner could become free. He finally sees the fire and realizes that the shadows are actually fake. This prisoner could escape from the cave and discover there is a whole new world outside that they were previously unaware of. This prisoner will believe the outside world is so much more real than that in the cave. He will try to return to free the other prisoners. But upon his return, he was blinded because his eyes could not accustom to actual sunlight. The chained prisoners would see this blindness and believe they will be harmed if they try to leave the cave. So that is the story behind the allegory of the cave by Plato. Again, this is discussion of how humans perceive reality and whether there is any higher truth or existence. Next, for Plato, we have the existence of the two realms. So we have the realm of shadows, composed of changing sensible things, which are lesser entities and therefore imperfect and flawed. So the realm of shadows, or also called as the material or physical world, is the material things or material stuff that we see and interact on a daily basis. So everything that you can see and hold or touch or use are actually realm of shadows. And then we have number two, the realm of forms, composed of eternal things which are permanent and perfect, and it is considered as the source of all reality and true knowledge. So the forms are the abstract, perfect, unchanging concepts or ideals that transcend time and space. So they exist in the realm of forms. Even though the forms are abstract, that doesn't mean they are not real. In fact, the forms are more real than any individual or any physical objects. So concepts like redness, roundness, beauty, justice, or goodness are actually under the realms of forms. Individual objects like a red book, a round ball, a beautiful girl, or a just action, or a good person reside in the physical realm and are simply different examples of the forms. Okay, so to make it easier, the realms of forms are intangible or in the abstract form of the realm of shadows. So realm of forms, abstract, intangible, while the realm of shadows, these ones are the um, physical or tangible. side of the realm of forms. So forms refers to what is real. They are not objects that are encountered with the senses, but can only grasp intellectually. Next, human body and the physical world are imperfect. Humans have the rational soul, which is created in this image of divine emanating God or coming from God. So according to Plato, we have three components of soul. We have the first one, which is the reason or rational and is motivation for goodness and truth. We have the spirited, non-rational, and is the will or the drive towards action. This part of the soul is initially neutral, but can be influenced or be pulled into directions. And then we have the appetites, are irrational and lean towards the desire for pleasure of the body. So according to Plato, the appetitive part of the soul is the one that is accountable for the desires of the people. It is accountable for the effortless cravings required to stay alive, like hunger, thirst, and for pointless cravings like desire to overfeed. So the desires for essential things should be limited by other sections of the soul, while illegitimate desires ought to be limited entirely by other elements of soul. On the other hand, the opposite, the rational soul is the thinking element in every human being, which decided what is factual and merely obvious. So judges what is factual and what is untrue and intelligently makes sensible decisions. And then finally, the spirited soul produces the desires that love victory and honor. This is the part of us that loves to face and overcome great challenges. Okay, so to give an example, for the desire, for the appetite, probably you want to eat something that you are craving for. So probably you're craving for sweets. Okay. Now, for the side of the appetite, since you are craving for it, you are um, requiring yourself to intake sweets. The opposite of that, for the rational side, it will tell you to that it will tell you that if you eat too much sweet, probably something will happen to your teeth, or probably you will become diabetic someday, or you will gain weight someday. Okay, so those are the opposites, the rational one and the appetite, which is your craving or effortless cravings required by your body. Next, we have St. Augustine of Hippo. So for St. Augustine of Hippo, the main concern was God and man's relationship with God. So did not believe that self-knowledge and happiness were the ultimate goal of man. So man should rely on God's command and his judgment of what constitutes good and evil. They held faith supreme over reasons and logic. So other philosophers focuses more on information or seeking of knowledge or rationalizing between the soul of an individual, the needs of an individual. For St. Augustine of Hippo, it's more on that God is the ultimate source of command, and his judgment is what constitutes good and evil. Then for St. Augustine of Hippo, he has two realms. The first one is God as the source of all reality and truth. So God as the source of all reality and truth. So man is capable of knowing eternal truths, made possible through the existence of one eternal truth, which is God. But without God, man could never understand eternal truth. It means that those who know most of God will come closest to understanding the true nature of the Word. Okay? If you are much closer to God, then therefore you have a better understanding of the eternal truths. Since St. Augustine of Hippo believes or proposed that it is that God has the supreme command and his judgment is what constitutes good and evil. The second realm of St. Augustine of Hippo is the sinfulness of man. So the sinfulness of man is basically the cause of sin or evil is an act of man's free will. So without the guidance of God or the teachings of God, it might cause, or an action of a man might cause a sin or an act of evil. So for St. Augustine, the role of love, real happiness can only be found in God, for He is love and created humans for them to also love. And on the other hand, we have disordered love, which results when man loves the wrong things, which he believes will give him happiness. So some of those disordered love is, number one, the sin of greed or the love of physical objects, the sin of jealousy, the love for other people that is not lasting and excessive, and the sin of pride, the too much love for the self. St. Augustine of Hippo, love of God is the supreme virtue, and only through loving God can man find real happiness. And all things are worthy of love, but they must be loved properly. So you cannot be too much attached to physical objects, to the status of other people, and of course, to yourself. Next philosopher we have Rene Descartes. He discovered that the human mind has two powers. So Rene Descartes discovered that the human mind has two powers. Those two powers are, number one, intuition and deduction. So the first one, intuition, it is the ability of the human mind to apprehend direction of certain truths. This is also called an impression and instinct. While deduction is the power of the mind to discover what is not known by progressing in an orderly way from what is already known. Also, Rene Descartes said that I think, therefore I am. So one of the most famous quotation by Rene Descartes, I think, therefore I am. So the meaning of this, or the story behind this, is that I am able to think, so therefore I exist. A philosophical proof of existence based on the fact that someone capable of any form of thought necessarily exists. So if you can think, so therefore you can consider that you are existing. Next we have John Locke. So for John Locke, knowledge are results of ideas produced by the things we experience. It involves two forms. We have number one, sensation, and the other one is reflection. So sensation, we experience it through our senses, and then reflection, the mind looks at the object that we experience and discover its relationship between them. Okay, and then our ideas are not innate, but rather the mind is a tabula rasa or a blank form or blank slate. So, tabula rasa, everyone started with a clean slate of blank paper, and as we age and experience things, we manage to fill that paper up with information and knowledge. Nothing exists in the mind that was not first in the senses, according to John Locke. So, the more senses we use, the better we understand and learn and gather information. Morals, religious, and political views must come from sense experiences, and morality has to do with choosing or willing the good. So, the past has something to do with who we are now, especially when it comes to our morality, our religious side, and political views, and it affects our everyday lives. Next, we have the three laws according to John Locke. We have the law of opinion, the civil law, and the divine law. The law of opinion states that actions that were praiseworthy are actually called virtues, and those actions that are not praiseworthy are called vices. And then the civil law, right actions are enforced by people in authority, just like the court and the police, and divine law set by God on the actions of man, eternally true, and the one law that man should always follow. Next philosopher, we have David Hume. So for David Hume, he was credited for giving empiricism its clearest formulation. It states that the mind receives material from senses and calls it perception. The mind receives material from senses and calls it perception. Okay. So perception can be in different forms. It depends on how an individual perceives things. So just like this one. So look at the picture. So there are actually two words present in the picture. So I'm going to ask you during our conference, what word did you saw first? And then also with this one, there are two words present in the picture. And then this picture actually tells a story. So by just looking at the picture, what message can you perceive? And this one. Okay. So to continue with David Hume, for David Hume, there were two types of perception. We have impression and ideas. Impression, immediate sensation of external reality. So more vivid than the ideas it produces, while ideas are recollections of this impression. So you have impressions first, diba? You have your first impression, and then based from those impressions, you're going to collect your ideas. These two make up the content of the human mind because without impression, there will be no formulation of ideas. And imagination has the ability to connect two ideas to form complex ideas. Next, we have two principles in relating ideas. We have the principle of resemblance or similarity, and then we have the principle of contiguity or association. So we have two pictures here. Let's focus first on the left side. The first picture are combinations of circles and triangles. So both different from one another, different shapes, but has the same color and face. So two ideas resembles one another even though they are different. Example is the idea of having a stable job in the future and the idea of getting a diploma. It resembles one another since the end goal is to become successful in life, and getting a diploma leads to having a stable job. Next picture, the picture on the right. So we have human shadows, groups of human shadows forming the silhouette of a tree. So the second picture, you may associate different ideas to become one big idea. So an example of this is brainstorming during a group project or a class presentation. Next, we have Immanuel Kant. Awakened by Hume's philosophy, perception, mind is not just passive receiver of sense experience, but actively participates in knowing the object. Okay? So instead of mind conforming to the world, according to Kant, it is the world that conforms with the mind. So kingdom of God is within man, and it is our duty to move towards perfection. Again, for Immanuel Kant, instead of mind conforming to the world, it is the world that conforms with the mind. Next, we have Sigmund Freud. He was the proponent of the unconscious mind. So according to him, repressed thoughts and memories have enough psychic energy to impose its control on the person's consciousness. So when you say repress, something that you are trying to hide, something that you are not trying to express, something that you want to forget, those are repressed thoughts and memories. But the manifestation is given the term hysteria or uncontrollable fear. Then we have subconscious, serves as a repository of those repressed thoughts and memories or past experiences, fantasies and urges or strong desire. And then the components of the unconscious mind, we have the id, the ego, and the superego. Okay, for the id, it's the instinct. For the superego, it's the morality. And for the ego, it's reality. Okay, again, id is instinct, superego is morality, ego is reality. So think of it like this way: the id is the evil side, superego is the good side, and then in between, the mediator is the ego. So let's say, for example, your instinct tells you to eat a chocolate bar. So that's your instinct, you want to eat a chocolate bar. And then the superego will tell you that you cannot eat a chocolate bar because you might gain weight again, just like my past example. Okay, or you might get you're at risk of diabetes. But the ego's job is to mediate between the two. So the ego needs to satisfy the id and the superego. So the ego will tell you that you may eat a chocolate bar or you may eat chocolate or sweets, but in moderation. So the ego satisfies the id, and at the same time, it satisfies the superego. Next we have is Gilbert Ryle. So for Gilbert Ryle, man is endowed with free will. So free will was invented to answer whether an action deserves a blame or a praise. Free will involves moral responsibility, and actions must be moral for it to be free. Actions must be moral for it to be free. Two types of knowledge according to Gilbert Ryle. We have knowing that and knowing how. So knowing that, knowing facts and information, so considered as an empty intellectualism, while knowing how, using facts to performance of some skill and technical activities. So people may acquire knowledge without the ability to use it to solve practical problems to make his life easier. Therefore, knowledge will be worthless. Knowing involves an ability and not just an intellect. So knowing that, facts and information, knowing how, using those facts and information to performance of some skill and technical abilities, or the actual application of those information. That is knowing how. Next, we have Patricia and Paul Churchland. So for them, man's brain is responsible for the identity of self, that the biochemical properties of the brain is responsible for man's thoughts, feelings, and behavior. So quite different from the other philosophers. For Patricia and Paul, it's more on the physiological aspect. So the way an individual decides, control impulse, the way you see yourself is actually determined by his neurons, hormones, and overall genetic behavior patterns. And then last one, we have Maurice Merleau-Ponty. So for him, his greatest work was Phenomenology of Perception. So the body and perception are intertwined together. The body is our medium or material for having a world. The body-self relationship is not one thing. You first need a physical body and brain before you can create an essence that is you. So for him, it is a combination of the body and self. So thinking, doing, and actual self-discovery. So our thoughts move us to act physically. Without the physical aspect of our body, there's no self-conception. That is according to Maurice Merleau-Ponty. And for my last slide, I have two quotations here. Carve out and claim the time to care for yourself and kindle your own fire. And don't be afraid of being different. Be afraid of being the same as everyone else. Okay, I'm going to end the discussion here or the lecture here. For the insights about or regarding these two quotations, I'm going to ask you during our video conference, and also for your questions and clarifications also, and also for the further discussions will be on our next video conference. So that's it for our lecture number 2 for understanding the self, and then I'll see you next week for our video conference. Okay, that's all. Thank you.